Hi, I'm Ross Yelsey. I'm an Assistant Director of Admissions and Marketing at Columbia Journalism School, and I'd like to welcome everyone who's tuning in today from around the world to today's webinar about the Master of Arts program, which is a very exciting program we have here. I'm really pleased to welcome two people from the school to talk about the program, Jane Eisner, Director of Academic Affairs, who joined the school this year, and Nicholas Lemann, the Joseph Pulitzer II and Edith Pulitzer Moore Professor of Journalism and Dean Emeritus at Columbia. And I thought we'd start the webinar by just having you both introduce yourselves for a couple minutes, talk a bit about your career as a journalist and as an educator.
Okay, well, my name's Nick Lemann. I've been a journalist for longer than you've been alive, maybe not longer than you've been alive, for a very long time. Mostly doing, mostly in print, although a little documentary, mostly in magazines and books, although a little newspaper, in a whole bunch of places around the country. My sort of big journalism homes for the last 35 years have been first the Atlantic Monthly and then the New Yorker. I started teaching many years ago part-time, and started teaching part-time at this school, I guess in the late 1980s. So I've had a long association here too. I came here in 2003 as the dean of the school, and since then, this has been where I live. I was dean for 10 years, and now I've been a professor for 6 years after being dean. But I want to stress, and this is true of a lot of us professors here, I'm still an active working journalist, always working on some story or other, and always, publishing something.
Cool. And Jane, how about yourself?
Well, as Ross mentioned, I came here as a staff member just this past summer, but I've had a long association with the journalism school. I was a student here. I did my Master's of Science degree many years ago. I worked for newspapers in Norfolk, Virginia, for the Philadelphia Inquirer for many years. I most recently was the editor-in-chief of The Forward for more than a decade. I've also taught a lot. I've taught for 5 years at University of Pennsylvania, and also more recently at Wesleyan University. So I feel so lucky to be here because it just combines all the things that I love to do, doing journalism itself, teaching and working with students, and being part of a really vibrant intellectual community.
Great, thanks. And a question we've been asking a lot of people who've been participating in our webinars this year is, for people who have been working as journalists for many years now, how do you kind of stay current on what's happening in the profession, as you continue working in the field?
Well, I personally live in a world where I have to struggle not to do that because I've been a journalist for so long, and most people I know are journalists, and I live inside a journalism school and so on. But I want to distinguish, this leads to what the MA program is and does. You can define what's going on in journalism in a couple of ways, and they're not mutually exclusive. So one way, and the way it usually goes, is to define it in terms of delivery systems. What's current in journalism, a few years ago was slideshows. They were all the rage. Now podcasts, things like that, data displays, et cetera. And the school is set up to do a lot of teaching about those things. The other side is the more substantive side. What's your story about? And that's more the focus of the MA program.
Right.
I think it's also really important to give journalists a chance to think deeply, to learn deeply, and to learn not just from their professors, but from their fellow students. And that's what I find so refreshing about being here. Everyone's very aware of the news. Of course, these days you can't not be, and it's in our DNA anyhow. But we also have the chance to reflect on how to cover things. And I think that's so essential.
Great, thank you. So I think we'll move on to the subject of the webinar, which is the Master of Arts program. And I'll start by asking Nick about why, as Dean, you established this program. Why was it important, you think, to have this additional program beyond what the MS has been offering students here?
So, a really quick history of the school. The school was founded in 1912, so it's over 100 years old. And initially, it offered an undergraduate degree. You'd take basically 2 years of Columbia College and 2 years of Columbia Journalism School, and then you'd graduate with a bachelor's in journalism. In the early 1930s, the school was changed into a graduate school and stopped teaching undergraduates, which is still true today, and started offering the Master of Science degree, our oldest and biggest degree. When we added the Master of Arts program, the first graduating class was 2006, so it's now over 10 years old. It was the first time the school had added a professional degree program since way back in the 1930s. And it gets back to what I was saying a minute ago. The school has been, if you will, whipsawed back and forth, but we're now less whipsawed and more offering options between two approaches. When it first started, it was very focused on teaching journalists how to understand complicated subjects that they might cover. There's a very stirring essay by our founder, Joseph Pulitzer, sort of outlining this. And he says, very sternly, I don't want students to learn any skills. I only want them to learn economics and history and sociology and all that stuff. After a few years, the school really shifted to the skills model, and at various points had a newsroom in the school, and the education was essentially putting out a newspaper. So at the moment I came in as dean, the feeling was the school was great on skills and, with needs for constant updating as the digital revolution rolled on, but wasn't as good at teaching substance, which is important in a globalized, increasingly complicated world. So we wanted to start a second program that would say, essentially, you've got the skills, but if I say there's a 3-alarm fire, go cover it and file in 4 hours, you got that, you can do that. If I say, okay, next assignment, the Federal Reserve Board is thinking about changing the prime rate by 200 basis points, and how is that going to affect the global economy? A lot of journalists would say, no, that's not my story. Right. So we want to get you over that fear and assume you have the skills and show you how to apply the journalistic skills to possibly daunting, complicated subjects that require knowledge and context.
And as people look at our curriculum, our programs that we offer at Columbia and other schools, sometimes they have a Master of Science only or a Master of Arts, and they're sometimes interchangeable in people's heads. So as they think about this and figure out what might be the right fit, how would you describe maybe the differences in the two programs, the MA and the MS, in terms of what you would be getting out of a degree in either of those?
Well, I'll go back some. Because the MA, as it's evolved, is assuming that you have basic journalistic skills. Not every single student does, but almost all do. It gets a little bit older group. The median age is more around 30, I'd say, and the MS is younger. I'd go back to what I said a minute ago. If I say to you, Ross, there's a 4-alarm fire in the Bronx, go, and you think, I got this, then you don't belong in the MS program, probably, unless there's some other skill-based thing that you feel you don't know. But, the MA is generally for people who already know how to do a story and want to take their work to the next level.
I think too the MA program is different from the MS program because the MS is really for generalists, because you will be able to write about all sorts of things. And certainly that was my experience when I was here. I had worked briefly for a daily newspaper, but I really wanted to polish my skills and get them more sophisticated, work on bigger projects, and frankly, be in New York, which is, in my view, the best news laboratory in the world. But what I'm seeing in the MA students is that they've chosen, some of them may be political reporters, but they want to become much more skilled in business and economics. Some are covering science, but feel like they don't have the intellectual grounding in it to really do the kind of amazing work that they want to do. We also offer an array of investigative skills reporting, because that's important in all the disciplines, not just in politics, but in science and business and in arts and culture. And so I think it's for people who, yes, they have the skills, but they also have the desire to go deep into a particular subject.
By the way, we offer applicants, if you think, I can't decide which program I'm better suited for, we will decide for you. And we do that with people every year. There's a box you can check. Would you be willing to be considered for either program? And then we'll kind of tell you which one we think is the better fit for you.
Great. I guess we should pull back a little bit and talk about what the program actually entails. So it's a 9-month program, 2 semesters. Could you speak a little bit about the courses all the students will take in a similar way, and some of the things that will change depending on what your interests are?
Yes, so all the students, arts, science, business, politics, take a seminar, meets twice a week for quite a few hours, usually 3 hours each session. It is taught by the professors in that discipline. So Nick teaches 1 semester of the politics seminar. So you're really learning from the best. And that is the core group. In addition, there's a class called Evidence and Inference that Nick teaches at the first semester that everyone takes. There's a selection of investigative skills classes for semester that are basically 3 of them, and all the MA students will take 1 of the 3 classes taught by superb journalists. And then for most of the disciplines, there's a chance to take an elective the first semester and 2 electives the second semester, except for business, because business requires so much specific knowledge that in the business concentration, the first semester you take accounting, in the greater university, second semester take finance, and then also an elective. And then finally, there's the thesis. You know, when I was an MS student here, I thought doing the thesis was one of the best experiences that I had, and really prepared me for doing longer form journalism as my career progressed. But the Master's of Arts thesis is even a bigger deal. Students are already working on it now, and we can talk about that in a moment, but it's really meant to be a large, long-form kind of piece with reporting and research over many months, and a chance to really sort of show what you got, and pursue a passion and an interest in your field, and that's a very key element of the MA program.
And I should say, first, the MA thesis can be executed in any medium. Second, the program itself is very international. It's usually almost always over half non-U.S. It has that kind of diversity in the classroom, and many of the students do thesis projects all over the world. So it's not just writing in New York. They go to, you know, Myanmar and South Sudan and just about everywhere. Somebody somewhere along the line has done a thesis project from. So and we have some funding to support that, not a guarantee of funding, but we're very proud of the fact that the MA students can do a really major work of journalism, almost always the biggest thing they've ever done in their lives, on a global scale.
Right. I know, and a lot of our students are able to publish those pieces, you know, after they're here too. I know Casey Parks, who is a Spencer Fellow this year at the Columbia Journalism School, is a alum of the politics concentration.
Right,
from
and
a
she
couple
published her thesis in the New Yorker, and there've been a lot of them get published. Some of them have turned into books. Some of them have turned into documentary films. So there's a you know, there's a good pipeline there.
Right. And I guess I could speak to what the process is like for a student who might be coming here and not quite sure what they want to do as their master's project. How does that process begin as a student in MA?
Well, some students come and have an idea that they want to pursue, and oftentimes that gets left behind because something else more enticing occurs. And the job of the school, my job, is to really pair the students with the best thesis advisor that we can find for their skill set, for their subject matter, for their personality. All of the instructors advise theses, but because it is so labor intensive, and we have this year 44 students in the MA program. So we also rely on other instructors from the journalism school and some adjuncts as well. And throughout September and early October, it's my job to work with the faculty to understand the needs and the desires of the students and pair them up. So in the last few weeks now, everyone has an advisor. They're starting to meet with their students already and figure out what the big story will be. And we have different milestones through the course of the year to help you out. So it's not like you meet with your advisor every now and then, and all of a sudden in March you write 8,000 words. Doesn't work that way. In just a few weeks' time, the first draft of the pitch, about 1,000 words, is due, and that will be reviewed by me and the faculty and the advisors, and we'll be able to give guidance on that and help the student move along. Oftentimes the bulk of the reporting is done during winter break, which is a good time to do that because then there is a first draft due and then a second draft due. So it's a very hands-on kind of experience. It's really like you get the chance to work with your best editor for many, many months on a project that most often is in text, but we have a student doing an audio project this year. In the past, we've also had video projects as well. And for those students, we pair them with people who are specialized in audio and documentary and visual work, because in that case, it really is a different approach to doing the story.
Great. And I guess aside from the academic experience, I thought I would ask about the student experience. I walk into the school and it's been so lovely out the last few weeks that I see a lot of the MA students, not just from their concentrations, but from the general MA class out on the steps, socializing, doing things together. And I was curious what your thoughts were on how our students build like a social network while they're here too.
Oh, absolutely. Some of the students are rooming together. I think that there's a real bonding experience that happens within the concentrations. But then also I've seen people from different concentrations also really get to know one another. Even when I was here for the MS program, I felt that there were times when I learned as much from my fellow students as I did from the faculty. And I think it's especially true in the MA program because the students are more experienced because half of them are from overseas and bring with them different cultures, different ways of looking at things. And I just find them all really, really interesting. And I think they delight in one another. It's a very collaborative atmosphere. It is not competitive. This is not graded. You get extensive evaluations, but it's not like people are pitting themselves against one another. It's really about doing the best we can. And Nick, didn't you say that there were a couple of marriages?
We're at two marriages so far and hoping for more. And they don't tell me about relationships, so that I don't know. And we've got a few, I would say, MA grandchildren out there. It's a small program, so everybody does meet everybody else, and they stay in touch. And it's impressive to me that when we try to research each incoming class, how did you know about the program, was often recommended by a recent graduate of the program. So there's a kind of cycle there where people tell their friends about it.
Great, and I thought I would touch on career development too, which is a key thing here. So people are coming here to take their careers to the next level.
Yes.
And I was thinking of some recent alums who've been doing that. One that comes to mind is Abdi Latif Dahir, who was a MA politics student from, I think, the class of 16. And he was doing freelance, I think, before he came here. And now he's going to be the East Africa correspondent for the New York Times, which is really exciting.
Awesome. That's great.
And also, there's a woman in town a couple weeks ago for the UN Climate Conference, Disha Shetty, who was a MA Science class of 18 person, I believe, who was doing kind of health reporting in India before. She came here to the MA program, and she became really invested in climate issues. So she's been covering climate for India Spend and has gotten several fellowships to do that, and is really reporting internationally about a lot of climate issues as well. So interesting to see how people's trajectories change after coming through the program and finding new opportunities.
They do, and we take this really seriously. And we have already, in September, had a career workshop for the MA students. And it's different than the ones done for the MS students because, again, these are students who are specializing and have more experience. And there's a lot of one-on-one counseling. There are various workshops about resumes and cover letters and all that, and a constant stream of recruiters coming here to the school from large outlets and small ones and new ones and old ones to recruit our students. We're very intent on helping them get fellowships because fellowships and internships are not like the old days when you would just do this for free and get a lot of coffee for your boss. They're really serious programs that are paid,
basically.
And I think last year there were 4 students from the business concentration that went to Bloomberg afterwards. I mean, it's really important to us to help facilitate that as much as possible. And frankly, like, we know we have the quality graduates to do these jobs.
Very cool. And so I think I'll get to some questions we got in advance of the webinar. And if we don't get to everyone's questions who are asking in real time, I'll get to those. We'll write back to you with some responses in the future. So one is just figuring out, like, when it might be the right time. Say you've been working in journalism and you're thinking about a program like this, and I'm sure it kind of varies on each person's experience, but when might be a good time to take a leap into a program like this?
The term that I like to use is, people talk about mid-career. I would call the MA program late, early career. It's people who have been doing journalism for a while, typically. Often their career isn't quite where they want it to be. Either they want to learn how to do more ambitious work, longer form work, that kind of thing, more serious, substantive, specialized work on a complicated topic, or they just want to sort of reboot, refresh, and start again at a higher level. So that's what I would say is pretty typical. Partly for visa reasons and partly by preference, most of our students from abroad end up back in their home country eventually, at least, but often at a better job, or sometimes they do entrepreneurial things. I mean, just to mention a couple of those, there's a wonderful magazine in India called Caravan that's a kind of nest of MA grads edited by an MA grad named Vinod Jose. There's another from the first class MA grad named Kelly Niknajad, who grew up in LA in a sort of expat Iranian community, people who fled the Iranian Revolution, and has spent her whole career doing variations on real reporting about what's going on in Iran, which you can't do from within Iran, but from near Iran. So she's really established herself as one of the leading editors and writers about that. So those are the more kind of creative entrepreneurial kinds of options, or examples of them. And then there's examples of just people who get great mainstream jobs, like Terry McCoy has just been named Brazil correspondent of the Washington Post. Jeff Horvath from the business concentration is now covering a whole bunch of interesting stuff at the Wall Street Journal. So that's another kind of route you can take.
Great. And I had a good question from someone who knows they probably don't have that experience quite yet to apply for the MA, but they're interested in it. what could they do maybe in the next year or two to maybe be a stronger applicant for a program like this?
Well, I think the first thing is that just because you don't have a lot of experience doesn't mean that you should sort of not try anyhow. We do have some students every year who come, if not straight from college, then maybe with just a year or two of experience. So I think a lot of it depends on your maturity level, your skill set, and your interest in a particular topic. I always think that the best way to get better at journalism is just doing more journalism. And so I would imagine that that might be the best way to do that too.
And a question we've gotten a couple times, we offer a Master of Science in Data Journalism program, which is very exciting at Columbia. And people who are interested in business, the MA business track, are wondering maybe how those programs might differ in terms of what you would get from the training in them.
Well, they're pretty different. The data program, is much more quantitatively oriented.
Right.
The business concentration, you do quantitative work, as you mentioned, but most of them are writing stories in text form and not doing presentations and displays and charts and graphs. And a lot of the work they do is essentially, traditional journalistic interviewing, leading to stories. The data program is much more technical and quantitative, and the work is more kind of in the office and less shoe leather.
I also think it's important to note that the business program, the key faculty member there is Winnie O'Kelly from Bloomberg News. She brings in all sorts of people from the business and financial world to speak to the class. They go on trips. I think last week or the week before they went to Bank of America. They really immerse themselves in the world of business, economics, finance. We're in New York. This is like the center of it. And so I think it's for people who want to learn more about that bigger space, not just the data skills, but also the substance of that sphere.
Great. Well, it looks like we have to wrap up already, but I thank Nick and Jane for joining us today, and definitely we'll get back with any questions you may have that we didn't get to today online. And I'd like to encourage you to keep in touch with us. We're going to have more webinars this fall on various topics, so we'll be announcing those in the near future through email and our social media, so just keep track of that. And we'll also just want to let you know about our deadlines. So the deadline for the MA program for the incoming class for 2020-2021, can't believe it's already those years coming up. That will be January 6, 2020 for our due date for the MA applications. And we also, as I mentioned, have a Master of Science in Data Journalism, as well as our Master of Science program, which is offered in full-time and part-time versions. The deadlines for those will be December 15th this year. And for our PhD in Communications program, we're also having a December 15th deadline. And one other deadline is January 15th for our dual degree in Journalism and Computer Science. So just keep everyone abreast of all of those incoming dates. It's going to be pretty soon that those are going to show up. Can't believe that, too. And if you have any questions in the future about anything, please contact us at apply.journalism@columbia.edu, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And thank you for joining us today, and have a great day.
Thank you.